Hi everyone. Okay, this is another one of the videos that I'm making for P4 Battleships. For Battleship, I guess is what the project is called, I think. Beside the point, I'm going to go over 5 common issues that a lot of people will run into. Hopefully by watching this video before you run into these problems, it'll, save you from ripping your hair out. Or if you're ripping your hair out, you can watch this video and maybe your issue is one of these 5. So let's go ahead and we will get started. So this is a very common conversation that IAs will have with a student, like in office hours or on Piazza. Essentially, it says, "My code is broken on the autograder. Help, please, thank you." And this is a difficult question for us to answer because we don't know what's wrong with your code, right? We can look at it for hours or whatever and try to figure out what's going on. But we're not very good at, well, people in general, I should say, are not very good at just staring at something and figuring out what's going on. We maybe were able to do it, and you maybe were able to do it as well with one of the earlier projects, like Project 1 or Project 2, because they're a little less complicated. But this project has a lot of moving parts, and looking at your code for hours, or having us look at your code for hours, is not going to be very helpful for you or for us. Like, it's going to not be a great way to spend our time. And usually the conversation goes something like, "My code is broken, can you please help?" And we're like, "Yes, let us help you." And then we'll ask you, "Did you write any test cases?" And then the student will say, "No, I haven't written any test cases yet." And that is where I would really recommend that if there's something wrong with your project, you should write some test cases for it, especially if you don't have any written. Because the way that we're going to figure out what's wrong with your code is by writing test cases and then using the debugger, right? Because there could be a million things that are going on. Like I said earlier, with this project, there are a lot of moving parts, and we don't know where the issue is going to be. So by writing test cases, that's going to help you help yourself, and that's going to help us help you. If you're not sure how to write test cases, I made one other video where I show you how to get started with positioning the ship. So that should get you sailing, if you will, with your test cases. I'm going to get fired for that one. And if you need extra help, then you can definitely come to office hours and we can help you write some test cases. And then it will make our lives a lot easier and it will make your life a lot easier and everyone will be happy. So my code is broken. If you don't have any test cases written, definitely write some test cases. Okay, issue number 1, we started at 0 because we're computer scientists and we're cool. So we say issue number 1 now is with game start. There are a lot of issues with game start because it is probably the hardest function in this entire project, right? It's the one where it's kind of like the main function, if you will, right? When we execute our code, you can press 1 to run those tests or press 2 to like start Battleship. And then game start will get run and it kind of acts like the main function or whatever when we're running Battleship. Which means that this is the function where we put everything together. We take all the pieces that we've just built, position, ship, player, and now we're running game and we write game start and we're taking all these like Lego pieces and building or whatever, right? That means that this just inherently is a very hard function to write. So my recommendation to you is if you're having issues with it or you don't know where to start, I would say, number 1, read the spec because we spend a lot of time talking about this on the spec. Then number 2 is to read the RME, which you can find, I will show you, in game.h, which is right over here. You scroll down, you got all that stuff. There it is, game start. You got a bunch of lines that will basically tell you how to do this, this function. The thing with the RMEs, I will also mention, is we write them very carefully. So if you really pick apart the RME, all the logic is going to be there. You just have to understand, like, breaking it down, boiling it down to all the little tiny components. And then you'll be able to get a hint of as to like how your code should be structured and what should go inside of here. We even tell you, I believe, which functions should be called. And it's more or less going to be in this order. So read the spec and then read the RME, and then that should get you going. I won't make that bad joke again. Thank God for that. And And then I would say read the spec again, number 3, and then read the RME again, number 4, because you probably missed something. I had to read the spec for like 3 times, and I had to read the RME like 4 times, and that was me. I don't know how many times you'll have to read it, but I would recommend reading it again because there are lots of little important details in there. After you do that, you have a good idea of what's going on. Then you make an attempt number 1, which is step 5. Write the function. Just do your best, right? It's probably not going to be right because it took me 2 or 3 tries to get it right. It'll probably take you a few tries as well, just because it's a difficult function, right? Then you can run sample run number 5, right? With the spec. Hopefully I have it pulled up somewhere. What I will do is this. I will pull it up. X93.org. And then we go to, I'll make this full screen. And then we go to project 4. And you'll see, if you expand this little thing over here, the little menu, at the bottom, you see sample runs. These are going to be your best friend for this project and for all EECS projects. If you take another EECS class after this, the sample runs. If you can pass all the sample runs, you're probably going to pass the autograder, right? No need to waste submissions to the autograder. You shouldn't submit to the autograder ever until you can pass all the sample runs, right? And sample run 5 is the one that I mentioned back here, right there. I mentioned that one because this is a full game and it ends in 17 moves, right? You got a whole lot of stuff. And I think it's a pretty safe assumption. Yep, 17, look at that. I think it's a safe assumption to say that if you can pass sample run 5, you're probably going to pass the vast majority of the test cases on the autograder. And I say run the sample run specifically for Start because Start's job is to run a game. So if you can run a whole game and it's working properly, then you probably wrote it correctly. And then you can get to the autograder. It'll be like, yes, you did it. Or it'll be like, no, you didn't. And then it'll be a lot easier to figure out what's going on. If you run the sample run and there are issues, then you are going to go back to step 6. If step 6 failed, you're going to repeat steps 4 through 6, which means you're going to read the RME again. Maybe read the spec again as well, like it never hurts. So read that again, and then you're going to make another attempt, go back and make your change or whatever, and then you run the sample run again, right? And you're just going to keep doing that until you get to step A, where you're like, yay, it works. Yes. And then if you're still having issues, definitely search Piazza, because you're not going to be the only one who has the issue that you're having, and they'll probably ask about it on Piazza. That's where you'll find the answer. This is the case for everything with this project. Definitely look on Piazza. Look pretty carefully because the issues you're having are not unique to you in most cases. So definitely check Piazza. That's game start. Next one is issues with load grid file. One thing that I've seen and one thing that is very, very common for people to do is they will be working on load grid file, or they'll be running their tests on the autograder, and they see that, okay, that ship is there, that ship is there, that ship is there, amazing, 4th ship, 5th ship. Why is there an asterisk in 8A or 1A or in this corner or in that corner? Like, where's that asterisk coming? Asterisk, I think. Where's that little star thingy coming from, right? Because it's not in the file, and it's probably going to be an issue with your while loop condition, right? So load grid file, you have to have a while loop because we're reading stuff from the file. We don't know if there are 1 ship. If there's 1 ship, we don't know if there are 4 ships, 50 ships, like who knows? So we're going to have a while loop, and we're going to be reading in these points to create a ship and then add the ship or whatever, right? We need a while loop for that. The bad way to do it is to say while, not INS. INS is the IF stream, I think. It could be something different in your case. While, not INS fail. So while it's not failed, then we read in the points and then we create and add the ship, right? And you're probably like, Nick, why is this not okay? Like, if it's okay, if it's not failed, I'll read in a point and then I'll add the ship. And then it will fail eventually because there are no more points left. And that is very, 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 very close, except for the fact that, let's take a look at this example to see why this won't work. So before we do that, just remember the condition is not INS fail, or like INS is good is another very common thing. A variation on this theme, more or less. Let's take a look at grid1.txt. So right here, I read in p start and p end, which means that it reads in 8b and then 8c. I construct the ship, I add it. Great, while loop goes around again. We pick up where we left off, reads in 6h, 8h, creates a ship, adds it, while loop goes again. 1f is read in, 1h is read in, create the ship, add it, while loop, 3e, 3h, create the ship, add it, and then while loop, 3a, 7a, create the ship, add it. So that was the fifth one. Now we see that we've reached the end of the file. At this point in time, ins.good is going to return true. Not ins failed is going to be true because we haven't run into any issues yet, right? Last time we read in the 2 points, everything was good. We pick up on line 6 in this example. Then we go back to our while loop condition. We say not ins.fail. Fail returns false because we're not in a fail state. Not false gives us true. We enter the loop. We create the points we read in. And that's where the issue happens. There are no more points here, right? So when we try and read in something that is just not there, that's going to cause some strange stuff to happen when we go here, right? We create the point, whatever. We read in the point. Because we're at the end of the file, there's nothing left to read. It's going to do some crazy stuff, undefined behavior, right? When we create these points. And then when we create the ship and add the ship from a point which was made incorrectly, right? You see the issue here? So just to summarize everything I just said, if you got lost there, is the not ins.fail or ins.isgood or whatever you decide to use. At this point in time, after we read in that last point and we're ready for the next one, that condition is going to evaluate to true. However, there are no more points left to read in. So when we go ahead, after we make it past this condition in the while loop and we read in the stuff, we're going to get some undefined behavior, and it's going to cause strange stuff like a little star appearing in one of the corners of the grid somewhere, when in reality there was nothing actually there to read in. How do we fix that? With a condition like this, right? So I have a position start and a position dot end, and then I say while ins p start p end. And what happens here is, again, ins will start at the beginning, and it will try and read this, right? 8b and 8c. That's what I'm saying inside the condition. But you're probably asking, if you've never seen this before, why can I have this as a condition? Like, how does this expression evaluate to true or false? And the reason why is after you read in the 2 points, or you see in with some other thing, right? Something in this form, in this case, we have ins with our 2 points. Ins itself is going to tell us whether or not the stream is in a fail state, right? It's going to be basically not ins.fail, right? So if it's failed, then ins itself will evaluate to false. And if it's not failed, so if it's still okay, ins itself is going to evaluate to true. That's essentially what's going on here. The stream itself, so ins, will eventually just boil down to, after it's done trying to do whatever you ask it to do, in this case, reading p start or p end, ins itself, when we refer to it inside of a conditional, so an if or a while or whatever, it itself will tell us whether or not it's good, right? So then why does this work here instead of this one not working? Let's take a look. So we read in these 2 points, fine. These 2 points, everything's good, good, good. And we hit the last one, read in the 2 points, it's still good, right? Now the while loop goes again. The condition is read in the 2 points. So we try to do that, but here, there's nothing, right? So it's gonna fail, which means that when ins itself gets evaluated, it's gonna return false, right? Because it's not good anymore. Therefore, we never enter this loop and we never create and add a ship that doesn't exist. Hopefully that made sense. So don't do this, do this, essentially. That was a load grid file. Let's take a look at game start. Issue number 3 is that game start is timing out on the autograder. This was an issue that I had once, and then I fixed it, and I still had it twice, and then I fixed it and it was finally good. And a lot of people have this issue. The reason why is you can only call load grid file twice. So this right here is an example of what not to do, right? Game start times out on the autograder. Oh, I got confused for a second. I'm sorry. The confusion was this. I was talking about load grid file, and then I saw the header thing here was game start is timing out. Yeah, it's a bit weird. If you have an issue with load grid file where you do this, it could cause timeout issues in other places. This is getting back to the idea that we start at the foundation and then we build up from there. If the foundation is weak, then everything else is going to crumble. Same principle here. Load grid file doesn't work. Their start's not working and load grid file doesn't work. The issues kind of like snowball and they build on each other. That's besides the point. Calling load grid file twice is going to cause game start to probably time out. And you're probably wondering, why would I call load grid file twice? When I took this class, I made this exact mistake. P1.loadGridFile grid1, that's going to return true or false because it's the function that returns a Boolean, right? Right here in this if statement, I just wanted to use load grid file's return value as a Boolean statement, right? I didn't want to actually like run it. I just wanted to use it as a statement to determine whether or not it was true or false. The issue with that is when we say .load grid file, we actually call the function and it tries to do its thing, right? Therefore, if we go down here and we say it again, we've called the function twice, right? Let me try to explain that in a slightly different way if that didn't make sense. Here, you're just wanting to use load grid file for the true or false value. That way, if it returns, like if this condition fails, to go to the else, and then we try to load the grid file, right? That's not okay. There's a little misunderstanding there, right? When we call a function, it's gonna run that function. We can't just call the function and only hope that we get the Boolean value. When you call a function, it's the commitment you're making. That function is gonna run and it's gonna do whatever, right? So when we call it twice, it's gonna cause an issue. So if game starts timing out, don't do it like this. You're gonna have to find a different way to do it. And I'll leave that to you. Finally, issue number 4 is that you can't open your text files. So there are going to be a few different things that could be causing this, right? But it essentially boils down to, it's because your text files are in the wrong place, which probably means you didn't configure your project properly, like your Xcode project or your Visual Studios project. Visual Studios, I don't know. You probably didn't configure your project properly. So first, if you're having issues with opening text files, make sure you set up your project properly. And we have tutorials on how to do this on x23.org. If you go to resources, well, let's take a look. Let's take a look right now. If you go to x23.org and then you click on resources, there we go. Getting started with Xcode and getting started with Visual Studio. Inside of here, we tell you how to set up the project. So definitely do that to make sure that that's not the problem. And then after that, you're going to want to check the spec for P4 and go to the section that's called File IO. So let's go ahead and we'll do that. Over here in the spec, File IO. If you're using Visual Studio, basically everything is properly set up for you. But I'd read through this section again if you are having issues with it. But for Xcode users, it's a little more complicated. You're going to have to go and follow these steps to finish setting up your Xcode project, to make sure that the .txt files will be in the right place, that Xcode is able to find them. If you don't do this, then you're not going to be able to open files, and that's a problem because you need that for this project. So go here and then follow these instructions very carefully. Make sure you do everything they ask you to do, and then hopefully things will work. In the event that they don't work, the next step is this. Go to your test.cpp or anywhere where you know some code is going to be executed. Then create an OS stream, which is an output file stream, right? So we take we take a file, we open a file, and then we write stuff to it. That's what the O stands for, output. We'll make an OS stream, and then we'll open something called the crazyfilename.txt. What this will do is it will create a new text file called crazyfilename.txt. And that file has to exist somewhere, right? Maybe it exists on your desktop, maybe it exists in the correct place for the project or whatever. But when we say .open crazyfilename.txt, it's going to go to wherever in your computer, and it's going to create that text file. Then what you can do is after that runs, and these are the only two lines that you need. Crazy file name could be whatever you want it to be. The principle behind crazy file name is that it's going to be a name that you know doesn't exist on your computer. So like each1v3 is the best class.txt, or like my cat's name is max.txt. Like those probably don't exist on your computer. So if you're on Mac and you hit Command Space and then you search for that file name, or if you're on Windows and you hit the Windows key and you search for that file name, it's going to show you where in your computer that file was created. And that folder is where your .txt files have to go. Hopefully that made sense. It's just kind of a last step. If the first step didn't work for you, then you can do this. You can just create a file using the OS stream. And then you can find where that file was created, and that's where the files have to go, because that's where your computer is going to be putting files and looking for files, whichever folder crazy file name ended up in after you run these two lines of code. Okay, that's about all I have for this video here. How do I stop this recording? It's right there. Okay, so hopefully if those were your issues, that's going to help you fix them. If not, if you're having other issues, definitely check Piazza to see if someone else has had the issue, and then you can come to office hours. All right, best of luck with the project. See you all later.